tying the knot, Valerie Justice was looking forward to a wonderful life with her teenage daughter and new husband.
Lawrence seemed to be a great father, and we were excited to have the American dream.
It was the start of a new chapter for Valerie.
But Valerie never dreamed the man she loved would tear her family apart in the most horrific way.
I never knew a person could be that evil.
He was willing to do anything to keep the truth from coming out.
I was screaming and crying. I just could not believe that this was happening.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. It was a self-imposed rule. Valerie Justice would not date anyone until her 15-year-old daughter, Erin, graduated high school in their Naperville, Illinois town.
Erin and I were extremely close. I had been divorced for 6 years, and she was the joy of my life. I wanted to get married again, but I wanted to concentrate on getting her through high school first. After that, I could get on with my own personal life.
But in 2003, when Erin spent her summer vacation with her father, Valerie soon felt a void in her heart.
I missed Erin tremendously, so I would visit my mother often because we lived not too far away from each other, and she was retired, and she was babysitting all the time.
And one afternoon, while visiting her mother, Valerie was happy to bump into a familiar face, 37-year-old Lawrence Lovejoy.
My mother had started babysitting for his little girl. And so many times when I would go by my mom's house, he was there. Lawrence was going through a divorce, and he was actually spending quite a bit of time there at my mom's. He was a little rough around the edges, just a t-shirt and jeans kind of person. But he was funny, and he was very charming.
Well, Lawrence was easygoing, and he was easy to talk to. He worked as a painter, and he was trying to get back on his feet.
Lawrence had been mentioned to my mother that he was looking for a place to stay. So I made the suggestion that since Erin was gone for the summer, he could share my apartment. He'd have a place to stay, I'd have some help with the rent. And I thought that would be a good arrangement.
Lawrence thought so too, and was more than happy to accept.
I would look forward to going home knowing that someone was there. He was rather entertaining, he made me laugh, and we started spending time together.
My sister Valerie was very serious, and Lawrence was the funny guy. Valerie needed that break in her seriousness by his sense of humor.
By the end of the summer, Valerie decided to break her own rule.
One of the goals that he had expressed to me was to own a home. And I've always wanted to own my own home. He wanted to really progress through life. I found myself attracted to him, and then we ended up in a relationship.
But when Erin returned home in August, she made it known she wasn't keen on having a man around the house.
It was hard for her to imagine anyone else being in the house besides her and I. She didn't want to lose her privacy. But I did not want to end the relationship.
But Valerie did want to do things right.
So at that point in my life, it was my desire to be more Christian. I did not want to continue to live with Lawrence without being married to him.
So Lawrence came up with the perfect solution.
Lawrence looked me straight in the face and told me,
I'm ready.
And would I marry him?
Yes, yes.
So I did say yes, that I would marry him.
After 4 months together, Valerie and Lawrence tied the knot at the local courthouse with Erin by their side.
So it was a simple ceremony. No big wedding dress, no flowers. We walked out and we were holding hands and we were on our way. The future seemed very bright.
But that brightness would soon turn to darkness as Valerie realized the choice she made would destroy everything she held dear.
He had a whole nother side to him.
She had no idea this monster was lurking in her house.
I just cried and cried. I just could not believe that he would do something so vicious.
In November of 2003, newlyweds Valerie Justice and Lawrence Lovejoy were eager to start their life together with Valerie's teenage daughter, Erin.
I was excited. I had everything that at this point that I desired. I had my daughter by my side. I was married again. And we started the process of trying to see if we could qualify for a mortgage and buy a home.
It was very important to Valerie to become a homeowner. They were on the hunt for the right house that they could all be happy in.
But the following month, Valerie came home to find Lawrence and Erin in a screaming match.
Lawrence was so enraged. They were yelling back and forth. He was very upset that Erin had been on the phone all afternoon, supposedly talking to boys. I didn't quite understand why he was so concerned.
There was a disconnect in their parenting styles. Lawrence felt he was going to be the one to discipline her, but Valerie didn't feel it was Lawrence's place.
I informed him that any decisions that had to do with Erin were to be totally left up to me. He really got upset because I was basically telling him that I don't need your help. And he wasn't happy about that.
So Valerie did her best to smooth things over.
I talked to Erin and, asked her to just wait until I'm home, before you get on the phone, and then that way there won't be any problems.
For the next few months, things seemed to be going according to plan.
There were no more big blowouts between Erin and Lawrence. We bought a new puppy for the family, and we're making plans to purchase a townhome.
But there were a few sacrifices. Valerie took on a second job as a cashier to earn extra money for closing costs, which meant Erin was at times a latchkey kid.
Erin would come home on her own, and I would call her and check in on her. So, we had a good system of keeping in touch with each other. Plus, Lawrence was home during the day, and then he worked the midnight shift at his company.
And Valerie couldn't help but notice that Erin and Lawrence seemed to be fighting less often.
Erin was in driver's ed, and so Lawrence volunteered to take her out driving. When they got home, they were both laughing, and I was relieved to see that things were getting better.
So Valerie set her sights on the closing of their new house, which was set for March 5th, 2004. But just 2 days before the closing, when Valerie made a routine call home to check on Erin, everything changed.
Erin answered the phone, and I said, "What are you doing?" She sounded just kind of aloof.
Are you okay?
Like she was preoccupied. We got off the phone, but something just didn't sit right with me.
And when Valerie received a call just a short time later from a police officer, she knew in an instant something was terribly wrong.
Lawrence had a dark side.
It was just a nightmare.
I was in complete shock. What he did was just devastating.
On March 3rd, 2004, Valerie Justice felt a knot in her stomach after receiving a call from the local police.
The police officer said that they had my daughter. There was a problem.
Oh my God, what happened?
He said that I needed to come to this address he gave me. That's all he would tell me. I hung up the phone with him. I was scared. Now I'm like, what the heck's going on?
Valerie was in a panic as she immediately raced to the address.
I just had no idea what could possibly be the problem. When I arrived, the police officer immediately took me up to an apartment. It was a friend of Aaron's who she went to school with.
Officers led Valerie into the living room, where she found Aaron sitting on the couch, visibly shaken.
That's when the police officer told me, according to Aaron, that Lawrence had sexually assaulted her. So I said, "What do you mean?" Aaron said she had come home from track practice. And Lawrence offered to give her a massage. She told him to stop, and he just kept going. I was shocked. After all, he had a daughter of his own. And it really upset me. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm listening to what she is saying, and I'm trying to absorb it all. I didn't want to believe that this was really happening. But I made it very clear to Aaron that I was going to support her no matter what.
That can't be. He's just not like that.
Meanwhile, at the police station, Lawrence told investigators something else entirely.
Lawrence indicated that Aaron was just upset at him because he had questioned her cell phone usage. And because he was questioning her, she made the entire story up.
Without a confession, police didn't have enough to hold him.
There was saliva found on her cheek and on her breast. And it was the decision of the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office not to file charges until the DNA results came back from the crime lab. So Lawrence was not arrested that evening.
In the meantime, Valerie had saved enough money to close on the townhouse herself and settled on a new living arrangement, which didn't include Lawrence.
I got everything moved, and I didn't really know where he was staying. And I told Lawrence I did not want him around my daughter until we had gotten the DNA results. If the DNA results came back positive, my plan was to divorce Lawrence immediately.
But just a few weeks later, Valerie found herself in a bind and was compelled to ask Lawrence for a favor.
The puppy had gotten sick and needed to have a follow-up appointment with the vet. I asked Lawrence, and he made the appointment, and he was going to take her to the vet.
There was no chance Erin would run into Lawrence at the house, since she was going to spend the week with her father. But at the last minute, Erin's father canceled.
He was supposed to pick her up in the morning, but he had called to say that he was not going to be able to do that. So I called Lawrence, and I told him that he would need to move the puppy's appointment.
Aaron's going to be there, so we can't do this.
And then he said to me, okay, I will call the vet and do that right now. So I was relieved.
Within the hour, Valerie decided to check in on her daughter and make sure she was waking up.
When I called, I didn't get any answer. And I'm wondering, why isn't she answering? I started to get a little anxious. I finally went to my boss and I said, I just need to go home and check and see what's going on. I was thinking, maybe she just overslept, maybe she was in the shower. But, I had no idea. I had no idea.
And when Valerie arrived home, nothing could have prepared her for the horror she would find.
It was the most heinous attack that I have ever seen.
It was unimaginable what he did.
There was blood everywhere. My whole world just ended.
On the morning of March 27, 2004, Valerie Justice prayed that her daughter Erin was okay as she arrived home.
I started to call her name and was not getting any response. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. I got into the hallway, and I could tell there was something on the walls. I ran into her bedroom, and she's not in her bed. Across the hall was her bathroom. I pushed the bathroom door open. I saw Erin in the bathtub. There was blood all over the floor. I knew when I saw her that it was too late. I felt like I was suspended in space. It just felt like I was just spinning.
Stunned with horror, Valerie ran to the hall and called 911.
Now all I can remember is the dispatcher telling me that I have to stop screaming and that they were sending somebody over. I just sat down on the stairs. I couldn't move.
Police arrived within minutes and found that whoever had murdered Erin resorted to a disturbing level of violence.
Erin was stabbed, she was bludgeoned, and then she was drowned. Erin had lethal doses of cold medication in her system. I believe she was forced to take it. There was a rather deep knife wound to her neck. Whoever did this had a lot of hatred in them. It was the most brutal, vicious, heinous attack that I have ever seen.
And Lawrence Lovejoy quickly rose to the top of the list as a person of interest.
The next day, we began interviewing Lawrence Lovejoy. From 7 until 12:30, he could not account for what he did and where he was at. But we didn't have enough evidence to keep him, so we had to let him go.
3 months later, the DNA found on Erin during the alleged rape came back as a positive match to Lawrence Lovejoy. And when police identified Lawrence's footprint at the crime scene, there was no denying that he was Erin's killer.
I believe Lawrence Lovejoy went over there to try to talk her out of filing charges against him for a sexual assault because he thought the results would come back with his DNA. And Erin was not giving that to him. He killed her in such a brutal way, I think he just snapped.
On August 20th, 2004, Lawrence Lovejoy was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Erin Justice. 1 month later, he was indicted on charges of sexual assault and sexual abuse.
I was absolutely sick to my stomach. I felt responsible. It was me who allowed this monster into our lives. It hits me like a brick.
Valerie now realized that Lawrence must have become obsessed with Erin.
His rage about Erin being on the phone was out of place. He had some jealous rage against Erin talking to boys. I think the reason why Lawrence offered to take Erin driving that day was to gain her confidence. Maybe she would feel close to him. But he didn't know my Erin.
In 2007, Lawrence Lovejoy went to trial and was found guilty of first-degree murder. In light of his conviction, the sexual assault and abuse charges were dropped. But because of a technicality with a blood test, the conviction was overturned 2 years later.
That was discouraging. But we knew we had to go to trial on this again. It was going to be another guilty.
Finally, in 2011, Lawrence Lovejoy was once again convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It was rather bittersweet when Lawrence was convicted and didn't bring my daughter back. But I was glad that he couldn't be free to harm anyone else.
Today, Valerie is still haunted by Erin's death and wonders if she could have done more to protect her.
I never saw any sign.
Crystal Kunkel felt like the luckiest girl alive when she became the wife of the most amazing man.
Tommy was an incredible husband and father. He was great with the kids. Everything was perfect.
But this family man had a simmering secret.
I was totally shocked. It was 10 years of deceit, lies, and betrayal.
And Crystal's world would soon crumble around her when her husband was accused of the most horrific crimes.
These people are dangerous human beings.
I was completely devastated that I'd married somebody capable of something so horrible.
When it comes to love and marriage, things aren't always as they seem. Living near a place called Holiday, Florida might seem like fun, but for Crystal Kunkel, life was far from a tropical vacation. In the spring of 2002, after ending a 3-year relationship with the father of her newborn, the 22-year-old found herself transforming from a carefree young woman into a caregiver.
It had been 4 months since the last relationship. I was a single mother working really long hours at a window treatment company. I had a 6-month-old son, and between working and taking care of my son, I felt like I was going to have to juggle work and motherhood alone forever.
Romance seemed like a thing of the past until one day that March when Crystal saw a glimmer of hope.
My dad and I worked together, and I saw him and this guy, and I noticed that he was attractive, good-looking.
This is my daughter, Crystal. Oh, I don't think we've met before.
As Crystal's father introduced her to Tommy Garcia, one of her co-workers, she could tell right away that the 28-year-old was different.
The first thing I noticed was he was outgoing and nice.
And her instinct was confirmed over the next several weeks.
Tommy treated me really nice and sweet, and he would chat in his spare time at work. It seemed like he really liked me. I decided to show Tommy a picture of my son.
Oh my gosh, he has your eyes. Beautiful.
Tommy told me that he also had a young son. He was trying to get full custody of him. It gave Tommy and I a connection and made me feel like he was a really good family guy.
A few weeks later, Crystal and Tommy were eager to take their idle office chit-chat off the clock.
We would spend time with my son and with his son. I was having a lot of fun, and we were really falling in love.
Over the next 4 months, the two became inseparable and decided to take the next step.
I love New Jersey. What if I moved near you?
Of course.
It was great to have someone you could finally connect with and help raise my son. Tommy was like a single mother's dream come true.
So when Tommy took Crystal out for a romantic dinner on March 29, 2003, and popped the question,
Crystal, will you be my lawfully wedded wife?
Yeah.
she didn't have to think twice.
Tommy seemed to be nice and genuine. And he treated my grandson wonderfully. And I was very happy for both of them.
Although the lovebirds initially planned their nuptials for the following year, another joyous event soon eclipsed those plans.
About 6 months later, we found out we would be having a baby. So we decided to postpone the wedding.
In February of 2004, Crystal gave birth to another bouncing baby boy, while Tommy gained custody of his 6-year-old son and adopted Crystal's first child. And 1 year later, the two were united as one in a magical wedding ceremony.
I had the perfect dress, perfect cake, everything was perfect.
It was a very good wedding, very nice, perfect start to a family.
We were both really happy. But having all these kids, we needed a little bit more money, so I decided that I would work at a local pharmacy, and Tommy took a job at a landscaping company.
For the next 6 years, the Garcias lived busy lives with a full house.
He said, well, they must have never fixed it right the first time. I didn't have really any reason to doubt him, but I thought it was really weird.
Then, a few weeks later, things took an even stranger turn.
We were getting ready to head out for the day, and my son asked me for a toy out of the car. So I went to the car. I was looking for my son's toy. I saw this gun laying underneath the seat.
What are you doing?
Found it. And I said, what are you getting so mad about? Then he justified it, saying he played with it at work. I guess they would do different guy things during lunch. And I thought, they're all guys that work together. Maybe they do play with pellet guns, I don't know.
Why is it underneath the seat with all the toys? What if one of the kids had found it?
Look, it's nothing, all right? Just relax. I got it.
I thought it was kind of weird and suspicious that he was so mad about the situation.
Then, a few weeks later, as the couple attended a family event, Crystal noticed something creepy.
Tommy was talking to two young teenage girls, telling them that they were smart and beautiful.
You're going out really nicely.
Seemed really inappropriate, and the girls felt a little uncomfortable by the advance he had made.
It turned the picnic into an awkward situation. I just found it very off base and unacceptable.
I felt embarrassed, so I confronted Tommy. He said that they'd taken it all wrong. That wasn't what he meant by it. He just justified it again, that everything was fine.
And on the night of February 15th, 2012, her husband's strange behavior reached its peak.
Tommy would play basketball with his friends, and he would usually come home around 10 o'clock at night, and it was getting to be 11:30 at night, and I started to get worried. And I was mad because he was out so late and he hadn't called.
Finally, Tommy walked in the door.
It's about time.
He was hyper, he was talking really fast. He was really excited. So I said, "What are you doing coming home so late?" He didn't think it was a big deal that he didn't call or anything. He said, "I had to get the tire filled up with air." I was angry that it was another tire story. Just didn't really seem like it could be true.
Air in the tire.
Yeah, in the gas station. I found this phone.
Then he told me that he also found this phone by the air pumps. He said it's a brand new phone. He said he checked in the gas station and they didn't know who it belonged to.
Nobody claimed it, so I figured one of our kids could use it.
Then he told me that he wanted to give our son the cell phone. I asked to look at the phone, but he wouldn't let me see it. He said that there was no information on it. It had been wiped clean. I thought it was kind of weird that there was this new phone that all the information had been erased from. I didn't really think it made sense.
Crystal told me Tommy was acting a little odd, and I told her just to keep her eyes open and make sure he's not just telling stories.
I found Tommy's behavior really confusing, and I didn't really know what to do to get to the bottom of it.
But Crystal wouldn't have to wait long.
The next night I was at work and I got a phone call.
Hello?
It was Tommy. He said that I needed to come home.
I need you to come home right away.
What's going on?
Miss Garcia?
Police officer got on the phone. I thought, oh my God.
In February 2012, after getting a call from her husband Tommy, Crystal Garcia was completely caught off guard when a police officer got on the line and said Tommy was being arrested.
The police officer said, "You're going to need to come home and watch the kids."
And then the police officer told her why.
What?
I was completely shocked, and I thought there was some kind of mistake. I couldn't believe my husband could do that.
I'm on my way.
Her mind reeling, Crystal raced home.
I pulled onto our street. There was cop cars everywhere. My car was being seized. It was like something out of a movie. I was completely shocked, completely devastated that everything seemed to be falling apart right in front of me. The kids were in the window. Seeing the kids, the lights flashing, it was all like a nightmare. And my sons were looking at their father in handcuffs in front of the house. I felt that they shouldn't have to see something like that. They're probably scared.
Miss Garcia? can't talk to him right now. We're going to process them.
The cops didn't let me say anything. They didn't let him talk. They just told him, kiss me goodbye.
The next morning, when Tommy called from jail, he assured his wife that it was all a huge misunderstanding.
He told me that he did know the woman, and he said, it's not what you think. I gave a girl a ride home once, and she'd made an advance, and he'd turned her down, and she was upset and accusing him of rape. I thought that was a little weird. But I felt like there was really no reason for me not to trust him. I just hoped that it was true what he was saying.
But when a detective showed up the next day, her faith in Tommy's story really began to wane.
He said this girl who had been raped lost something, and we've been looking for it, and we can't seem to find it anywhere. And I said, oh my God.
Crystal's heart sank as she remembered Tommy giving their son a cell phone he said he found. And then the detective dropped a bombshell.
3 additional rape charges placed against Tommy.
Altogether, there's 4 rape charges and 2 kidnapping charges.
The detective explained that after Tommy's arrest, they discovered evidence that could tie him to 3 other rapes.
It felt like the whole world was crashing down. I was completely devastated. I couldn't believe that this could happen.
Crystal tried to stand on her own and try to muscle through it. She wanted to believe her husband was innocent. She wanted to believe that in the worst way.
I wanted to see what was really going on. So I got the police records at the county building, and I read the whole report.
Crystal was completely blindsided as she read that Tommy had admitted to being with all the victims. Devastated, she immediately confronted her husband at jail the next day.
I said, I just looked at the police report, and it says you admitted to the police that you were with all of these women.
You read her report.
I said, you told me that everybody was lying, the cops were lying, and this girl was lying. I said, at what point are you lying?
God, tell me the truth.
It was really the first moment where I knew he was lying.
Believe me.
I was really mad that not only that he had done it, that he led me on to believe that he didn't do it. It was just coming to me all at once. I couldn't believe that he could do this to me, to the kids, to everybody. So I decided I was filing for a divorce. I felt like this is it. I'm done.
And as prosecutors prepared for Tommy's trial, Crystal would finally learn the whole truth. And it was more horrendous than she could have possibly imagined.
It was unbelievable.
This was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was just unreal to believe. I felt like I was with somebody I never knew.
In July of 2013, Crystal Garcia was still in shock when her husband Tommy went to trial for sexual battery and kidnapping and had been charged with 3 other possible rapes.
I had cried pretty much every day, like I couldn't believe that this had happened to me and happened to the kids.
In court, the horrible details of the crime finally came to light.
The night he came home from basketball with the cell phone, Tommy had been driving down the road and he saw a woman.
Tommy drove by this woman and asked her if she wanted a ride.
said no.
He came back a second time. And she said no again.
I said, get in the car!
They drove up to the wooden area. He forced her out of the car and performed several sexual acts.
Then he took her phone so she wasn't able to call for help. And as she was driving away,
she was able to follow his taillights out of the area. She was able to flag down a motorist and call the police. She was able to give a description of the car and actually a description of the perpetrator. Police used that information to put together a DMV photo array from which she was able to identify Tommy Garcia.
Between the victim's testimony, her cell phone, and DNA evidence that conclusively linked him to the crimes, there was no denying Tommy was the rapist. On July 26, 2013, after 2 days of testimony, Tommy Garcia was found guilty on both counts.
It was completely crazy that he definitely did it, that this was him. It was just unreal to believe.
It's a shocking thing to think somebody you've been married to is someone like that. A monster.
On the same day as the verdict, Tommy Garcia was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences and labeled a sexual predator. 7 months later, he pled guilty to the 3 other rape cases and received a 15-year sentence.
I felt like that I was with somebody I never knew. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that I'd married somebody that was capable of something so horrible.
Knowing the awful truth about her husband, Crystal couldn't help but wonder if there were even more victims out there.
The times when he was having car problems, I wonder if there was more to it.
And she could barely stomach thinking of the young girls he had flirted with.
I worry that when he looked at other young people that maybe he had ulterior motives.
It's really unusual for someone who rapes to not have a history of other kind of violent or aggressive behavior. But we are not surprised to find that there may be others, and we have to hope others who have been their victims will come forward.
Seems just so unreal that he was somebody that I lived with. You know, you lock your doors every night and try to keep the bad people out, and really, I just locked the bad person in.
Today, Crystal still struggles with why her husband would suddenly choose such a dark path after 6 years of marriage.
There weren't any signs. He had a good family. He was good for so long, but something was wrong. Something snapped inside of him. I don't think I'll ever have all the answers.
He had everyone fooled. My parents, my grandparents.
At 4:37 in the morning, a telephone rang inside a small house in Santa Rosa, California. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. There was no voice on the other end, only breathing. Then the line went dead. Hours later, police would discover that the person who had been calling was already dead. 39 years would pass before investigators finally understood what that call meant. California, 1985. The summer heat had settled over Sonoma County, turning the roads pale beneath the afternoon sun. The vineyards stretched toward the hills. Small businesses opened their doors. Families went about their routine. Nothing about the morning of August 17th suggested that the quiet community was about to become the center of a murder investigation that would remain unsolved for decades. At 6:18 a.m., a delivery driver named Daniel Mercer noticed a vehicle parked behind an abandoned roadside fruit stand. The car looked ordinary. A faded blue sedan. Driver's door closed. Windows slightly open. No lights. No movement. Mercer almost kept driving. Then he saw the hand. It was resting against the passenger side window. He stopped. He approached the vehicle. And when he looked inside, he saw 31-year-old Rebecca Hale. She was sitting motionless in the driver's seat. There was blood on her clothing. The windshield was fogged from the inside. Mercer immediately ran back to his truck and called police. Within minutes, patrol cars arrived. The road was closed. Yellow tape went up. Detectives entered the scene, and one question appeared almost immediately. Why was Rebecca Hale there? She had not been expected at the fruit stand. Her apartment was more than 10 miles away. Her car had been found in an area she rarely visited, and the previous night she had told her roommate she was going straight home after work. She never made it. Rebecca worked as a bookkeeper for a small construction company. She was described by co-workers as organized, quiet, and dependable. She rarely missed work. She did not disappear without telling someone. She did not leave town without warning. She had plans for the following weekend. She had a birthday coming in September. She had recently started saving money for a trip to Oregon. Nothing suggested she wanted to vanish. Yet that morning she was dead. The first examination suggested blunt force trauma. There were defensive injuries on her hand, a broken fingernail, a small cut near her left wrist, and several bruises that appeared to have occurred before her death. Detectives immediately suspected Rebecca had fought with her attacker, but the strangest discovery came from the passenger seat. There was a single white envelope. No name, no address, no stamp. Inside was a photograph. Rebecca was standing outside a restaurant. She was smiling. Beside her stood a man. His face had been scratched out with a dark pen. Investigators could still make out part of his clothing: a gray jacket, a white shirt, a distinctive metal watch. The photograph became evidence, but it raised more questions than answers. Who was the man? Why had someone scratched out his face? And why was the photograph inside Rebecca's car? Detectives searched her apartment. They found no suicide note, no packed luggage, no indication she planned to leave. Her purse was missing. Her wallet was missing. Her house keys were missing. But her work badge was still inside her apartment. So was her passport. Her favorite jacket remained hanging behind the bedroom door. Her dog was still waiting for her. The animal had not been fed that morning. The details disturbed investigators. Rebecca had apparently left in a hurry. But why? At 9:45 that morning, police contacted her roommate, Susan Miller. Susan was devastated. She told detectives Rebecca had seemed nervous the night before. Not frightened. Nervous. There was a difference. Susan remembered Rebecca standing in the kitchen holding a cup of coffee she never drank. She had asked whether Susan had ever felt like someone was following her. Susan laughed at first. Then she noticed Rebecca was serious. Rebecca said she had seen the same dark pickup truck outside her workplace 3 times that week. She did not know who owned it. She did not know whether it meant anything, but she had written down the license plate number. That piece of paper was missing. Susan remembered one more detail. Before leaving for work that morning, Rebecca had said, "If I am late tonight, Dante, wait up." It sounded ordinary. At the time, nobody knew it would become one of the final sentences she ever spoke. Detectives began reconstructing Rebecca's movements. At 5:11 p.m., she left work. At 5:24, she stopped at a gas station. At 5:41, she was seen entering a small diner. At 6:03, she left alone. After that, the timeline became uncertain. A witness later claimed she saw Rebecca arguing with a man near a parking lot. The witness described him as tall, dark-haired, possibly in his 30s. He wore a gray jacket. That description matched the photograph, but the witness could not identify him. The photograph itself was not enough. The scratched-out face made identification almost impossible. Detectives searched for the restaurant where the picture had been taken. They eventually found it. The owner remembered Rebecca. He remembered the man, but he remembered something else. The man had not been a stranger. He had been sitting with Rebecca for nearly 40 minutes. They appeared to know each other. They had argued quietly. Then the man left. Rebecca remained at the table. According to the owner, she looked frightened afterward. He remembered asking if she was okay. Rebecca had answered, "I am fine." Then she left. The owner did not call police. He had no reason to believe anything was wrong. That decision would haunt him for years. Investigators wanted to know what had happened between Rebecca and the unknown man. They searched her workplace. They interviewed friends. They checked former relationships. They examined financial records. One name kept appearing: Thomas Avery, a former co-worker. Avery had worked with Rebecca 2 years earlier. They had dated briefly. The relationship ended badly. Avery denied involvement. He said he had not seen Rebecca for months. He agreed to an interview. His story was calm, too calm, according to one detective. But suspicion was not evidence. Avery had an alibi. He claimed he spent the evening at his brother's house. His brother confirmed it. No physical evidence connected Avery to Rebecca's car. No witness placed him at the fruit stand. No fingerprints. No blood. No weapon. Nothing. The investigation began to slow. Then detectives discovered something inside Rebecca's desk: a locked drawer. The key was missing. A locksmith opened it. Inside were copies of financial documents, bank transfers, invoices, company payments. Several transactions appeared suspicious. Rebecca had apparently been investigating something at work. Her supervisor claimed she was only checking accounting errors, but detectives were not convinced. Someone had been moving money, large amounts, and Rebecca had noticed. One document contained a handwritten note: "Ask about the blue account." That phrase meant nothing to detectives at first. Then they discovered that the construction company had a secondary account they rarely used. Money had been transferred through it for months. Rebecca had marked several transactions with red ink. The final entry was dated August 16th, one day before her death. Beside the amount, she had written 2 words: "Why me?" The investigation suddenly changed. Rebecca may not have been killed because of a personal relationship. She may have been killed because she discovered something. Detectives began examining everyone connected to the company's finances: employees, managers, accountants, contractors, even the owner. But there was still no physical evidence. The photograph remained the most mysterious clue: the scratched-out face, the gray jacket, the metal watch. The man who had disappeared from Rebecca's final evening. Investigators enlarged the photograph. They studied the watch. It appeared to have a distinctive rectangular face, a narrow silver band, a small dark mark near the 12 o'clock position. One detective recognized it. He believed he had seen the same watch during an interview: Thomas Avery. But when Avery was questioned again, he denied owning one. Detectives searched his apartment. Nothing. They searched his car. Nothing. They checked photographs. Nothing. The watch seemed to disappear. So did the case. Months passed, then years. The investigation produced theories but no arrest. The murder became one of those cases people mentioned in quiet conversation. Rebecca Hale, 31, found dead beside an abandoned fruit stand. Unknown killer. Unknown motive. Unknown man in the photograph. The years changed everything. The detectives retired. The restaurant closed. The fruit stand was demolished. The construction company changed owner. Witnesses moved away. Some died. The original case files were transferred into storage. The photograph faded. The evidence boxes remained untouched. And Rebecca's family waited. Her mother refused to accept that the case would never be solved. Every year, on August 17th, she placed flowers at the cemetery. She kept Rebecca's bedroom exactly as it had been. The same books, the same photographs, the same small wooden jewelry box. For decades, she told anyone who would listen that Rebecca had not simply disappeared from her life. Someone had taken her. Someone knew the truth. And somewhere, she believed, that person was still alive. Then, in 2024, a cold case detective reopened the file. Her name was Elena Vargas. She had been working through old unsolved murders when she found Rebecca's case. At first, she expected another investigation with missing evidence and dead witnesses. Instead, she found something unusual. The original evidence inventory listed a biological sample, a small swab, collected from Rebecca's clothing in 1985. Never tested. The technology had not existed. Vargas requested the evidence. The box arrived 3 days later. Inside was the old photograph, the broken earring, the clothing, the original reports, and the sealed biological sample. For almost 4 decades, nobody had known what that tiny piece of evidence could reveal. The laboratory opened it under controlled conditions. Technicians began extracting DNA. The sample was degraded. The amount was microscopic, but it was there. A partial genetic profile emerged. Then another test was performed. The result was unexpected. The DNA did not belong to Rebecca. It belonged to a man who had left biological material on her clothing shortly before her death. Investigators entered the profile into the available databases. The search returned nothing. No match. No name. No arrest. Just a number. But Elena Vargas did not close the file. She looked at the photograph again. The scratched-out face. The gray jacket. The metal watch. Then she looked at the DNA report. And for the first time in 39 years, the case had something it had never had before. A biological fingerprint belonging to Rebecca's killer. The question was no longer whether the killer had left evidence behind. He had. The question was whether investigators could finally discover whose DNA it was. And as Vargas reopened the old witness list, she noticed a name buried deep inside the original 1985 report. A man investigators had interviewed once. A man who had claimed he barely knew Rebecca. A man whose name had never appeared in the original suspect list. His name was Daniel Mercer, the same man who had discovered Rebecca's body. Daniel Mercer had been the man who found Rebecca's body. For 39 years, that fact had made him part of the story without making him part of the investigation. He had called police. He had waited beside his truck. He had answered questions. He had pointed detectives toward the vehicle. Then he disappeared from the case. Not literally. He simply stopped being relevant. At least, that was what everyone believed. Detective Elena Vargas read his original statement 3 times. Mercer said he had discovered the blue sedan at approximately 6:18. He said he had been making delivery. He said he had never met Rebecca. He said he had never seen her before. And he said he had not touched the vehicle. That final sentence caught Vargas's attention. I did not touch the car. She searched the original evidence photograph. There were no obvious fingerprints belonging to Mercer, but the statement was strangely specific. Nobody had accused him of touching the car. Nobody had asked him whether he had. Why had he volunteered that detail? Vargas pulled his name from the old witness list. Daniel Mercer, age 29 in 1985. Delivery driver. Married. No criminal record. No known connection to Rebecca. At least, that was the official version. Vargas ordered a background search. Mercer had died in 2016. Cancer. He had spent most of his life in Northern California. He had worked for the same distribution company for almost 20 years. He had 2 children, 3 grandchildren. No arrest. No major financial problems. No history of violence. On paper, he looked ordinary. Almost painfully ordinary. But Vargas kept reading. Mercer's employment records revealed something the original detectives had never documented. His delivery route had not normally taken him past the fruit stand. That road was outside his assigned territory. His company had changed routes that morning. The change was made at 5:42 a.m. Vargas requested the old dispatch records. The records were still stored on microfilm. The handwriting was faded, but the route change was clear. Mercer had been redirected, straight toward the road where Rebecca's body was discovered. Vargas stared at the document. Then she checked who had made the change. A supervisor. A man named Charles Bennett. Rebecca's father. Vargas froze. Rebecca's father had worked for the same distribution company. He had requested the route change. Why? Investigators had never asked. They had assumed Mercer simply happened to be there, but he had not. Someone had sent him. Vargas contacted Rebecca's family. Her brother was still alive. He remembered his father. He remembered the morning Rebecca was found, but he had never heard about the route change. Then he remembered something else. His father had known Daniel Mercer. They had worked together for years. The connection was suddenly much stronger. Vargas returned to the case file. Mercer had not just discovered Rebecca. He had been connected to her family, and he had been sent to the exact location. The detective now had a new question. Was Mercer simply the unlucky driver who found a body, or had he known where to look? She examined his original statement again. Mercer said he saw the vehicle from the road. He said the driver's side was empty. He approached. Then he noticed the hand. But according to the crime scene photographs, the hand was visible only from the passenger side. To see it clearly, someone would have needed to walk around the vehicle. Vargas realized something disturbed. Mercer's description of the body suggested he had already been standing beside the passenger window, but he claimed he had approached from the driver's side. It was a tiny inconsistency, almost meaningless. Unless Mercer already knew something was inside, Vargas requested every surviving photograph from the original scene. There were 23. One had never been included in the official report. A photographer had taken it from behind the fruit stand. The image showed the blue sedan, but it also showed something else, a dark pickup truck, parked several yards away, partially hidden behind a tree. The license plate was blurred, but the vehicle was unmistakable. The same type of truck Rebecca had told her roommate about, the truck she believed had followed her. Vargas enhanced the image. The truck had a dent above the rear wheel. A distinctive white stripe ran along the side. She searched the original records. There was a photograph of Daniel Mercer's delivery truck. It was not the same vehicle, but the company had records of another vehicle assigned to Mercer, a dark pickup. Vargas's pulse quickened. She found an old registration. The truck belonged to Mercer, but there was a problem. The truck had supposedly been sold 3 months before Rebecca's murder. Vargas located the buyer. The man had died years earlier. His widow remembered the vehicle. She said the truck had been purchased directly from Mercer, but she remembered something unusual. Mercer had kept the keys for several weeks. He said he needed to remove equipment. The widow did not think anything of it. Now it mattered. Vargas compared the truck's photograph with the vehicle seen near Rebecca's car. The dent matched. The stripe matched. Even the damaged rear light appeared identical. The investigator sat back. The first witness in the case had owned the vehicle that Rebecca believed was following her, and he had been sent to the exact place where her body appeared. But suspicion was still not proof. Vargas needed something stronger. She requested Mercer's old personal records, bank accounts, employment documents, phone records, insurance files, anything that might reveal a connection to Rebecca. The search produced one unexpected result. A payment. 3 weeks before Rebecca's death, Mercer received $4,500 from a company connected to the construction firm where Rebecca worked. The payment was listed as consulting. Mercer had never mentioned consulting work. Vargas investigated the company. It was one of the shell companies Rebecca had flagged. The same financial network. The same suspicious account. The same money trail. Suddenly, Daniel Mercer was no longer a random witness. He was financially connected to the investigation Rebecca had been conducting. Vargas contacted the company's former accountant. The woman was 87. She remembered Mercer. She remembered Rebecca. And when Vargas asked whether the two had known each other, the woman answered immediately. Yes, that answer changed everything. She explained that Mercer had occasionally delivered materials to Rebecca's workplace. Rebecca knew him. They had spoken several times. The accountant remembered one particular argument. Rebecca had confronted Mercer about an invoice. She accused him of delivering materials that had never been ordered. Mercer became angry. He told her to stop asking questions. Rebecca refused. The accountant said she remembered seeing Mercer leave the office that day. He looked furious. Rebecca looked frightened. The same pattern appeared again. A confrontation. A threat. A connection to the money. And now, potentially, a DNA match. Vargas returned to the laboratory. The unknown male DNA profile was run through a genealogical database. No direct match appeared, but distant relatives were identified. The profile seemed to belong to a man whose family line could be traced to Northern California. Investigators began building a family tree. The possible connection became stronger. The DNA might belong to a relative of Daniel Mercer, but that still did not prove Mercer himself was the source. Vargas needed a direct comparison. Mercer was dead. His medical records revealed that he had undergone surgery in 2009. The hospital still held archived material, a tissue sample, potentially enough DNA. Investigators obtained the necessary authorization. The sample was sent to the laboratory. The comparison began. For 2 days, nobody spoke publicly. The case remained classified. The family knew nothing. The media knew nothing. Even most officers in the department had no idea what was happening. Then the laboratory called. The result was ready. Vargas entered the lab alone. The scientist handed her the report. She read the first line, then the second. Then she stopped. The DNA recovered from Rebecca's clothing was consistent with Daniel Mercer. The probability was overwhelming. Mercer had left biological evidence on Rebecca. The man who discovered her body was the same man whose DNA had been found on her clothing. The room seemed to become colder. For 39 years, investigators had searched for an unknown killer. They had interviewed strangers. They had followed former boyfriends. They had examined financial crime. They had studied the mysterious photograph. And all along, the man who found Rebecca's body had been sitting inside the original case file. But Vargas still had one problem. If Mercer was the killer, why had he called police? Why had he brought attention to the body? Why had he remained at the scene? The answer came from another old record, a handwritten note from the original detective. It had never been included in the official summary. The note said, Mercer seemed unusually calm. Below it was another sentence. He asked whether we knew what was in the victim's hand. Vargas read it again. That detail had never been released. The victim's hands had been closed. Inside one hand was a small torn piece of fabric. The police had kept it as evidence. The public never knew. Mercer had somehow known. Vargas requested the fabric sample. The laboratory tested it. The fibers were consistent with the gray jacket seen in the photograph. The photograph investigators had spent decades trying to understand suddenly became much clearer. The scratched-out man was wearing gray. The torn fabric was gray. Mercer's DNA was on Rebecca, and the photograph had been taken weeks before her death. Vargas looked at the man's face. The face was scratched away, but the body remained. The jacket, the watch, the height, the posture. Then she noticed the wrist, the metal watch, the same distinctive rectangular face. Mercer's old family photographs showed him wearing one. His daughter confirmed it. She said her father had owned that watch for years. He had inherited it from his own father. After his death, the family had thrown away most of his belongings, but the watch had survived. It was in a box. Vargas obtained it. The watch was scratched. The band was damaged, but it was unmistakable. The same unusual mark near the 12 o'clock position. The same rectangular face. The same narrow silver band. The photograph had not shown a stranger. It had shown Daniel Mercer, the man who had claimed he had never met Rebecca, the man who had claimed he had never touched her car, the man who had discovered her body, the man who had been sent there by Rebecca's own father, and now his DNA had placed him physically with Rebecca before her death. Investigators reconstructed the timeline. At 5:42 a.m., Mercer's route was changed. At 6:18, he reported the body, but Rebecca had likely died several hours earlier. So Mercer could not have been the killer only if the evidence had been planted. That possibility was investigated. The DNA had not come from a surface easily contaminated. It had been recovered from material consistent with direct contact. The probability of accidental transfer was extremely low. Vargas believed Mercer had been at the crime scene before the body was discovered. But why? Then investigators found the missing phone records. Rebecca had made one call shortly before disappearing. The number belonged to a company switchboard, but the call had been transferred to a private extension. Mercer's extension. The call lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds. No recording existed, but the billing record did. Rebecca had called Mercer, not the other way around. and she had called him just 30 minutes before she entered the restaurant. The timeline became terrifyingly simple. Rebecca had discovered financial irregularity. She had confronted Mercer. She had arranged to meet him. She had taken the photograph. Something happened afterward, and Mercer had followed her. But there was still one missing piece, the photograph. Why had Rebecca scratched out the man's face? Investigators enlarged the original image again. This time they examined the background. Behind Rebecca and Mercer was a restaurant window. Reflected in the glass was another person, a woman, watching them. And on the table beside that woman was a small tape recorder. Vargas stared at the image. Someone had been recording the conversation. Someone had known Rebecca was in danger, and that person had vanished from the case completely. The investigation was suddenly larger than one kill. There was another witness, possibly another accomplice. And somewhere in the surviving records was a name that had never been connected to Rebecca's murder. Vargas ordered the restaurant records reopened. Employee lists, customer receipts, staff schedules, everything. One name appeared, a waitress who had worked that evening. She had been 22 years old in 1985. She had given police a statement, but her statement contained a strange sentence. I didn't hear anything unusual. Yet she had been sitting only a few feet away. Vargas found her current address. She was still alive, still in California, still using the same last name. And when Vargas called, the woman answered. The detective introduced herself. There was silence. Then the woman asked one question. Did you finally find out who killed Rebecca? Vargas said yes. Another silence followed. Then the woman whispered, then you need to know what happened after Rebecca left that restaurant. And for the first time in 39 years, a witness was ready to tell investigators what she had seen. The waitress did not want to speak over the phone. She asked Detective Elena Vargas to meet her in person. The meeting took place in a small cafe 2 counties away from the original crime scene. The woman was 70 years old now. Her name was Linda Harper. She arrived carrying a brown envelope. She placed it on the table. Then she looked at Vargas. I should have told them in 1985. Her voice was quiet, but I was scared. Vargas asked what she had seen. Linda opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. The same photograph investigators had recovered from Rebecca's car, but this copy was different. The man's face had not been scratched out. Vargas stared at it. For several seconds, she said nothing. Daniel Mercer, standing beside Rebecca, looking directly at the camera. The image was clear. No doubt. No distortion. No mystery. Mercer was the man. Linda explained that Rebecca had asked her to take the photograph. She had been sitting at a nearby table. Rebecca wanted proof that she had met Mercer. She believed something was wrong. She told Linda that if anything happened to her, the photograph would matter. Linda had not understood. She thought Rebecca was frightened because of the financial investigation. She never imagined murder. But she took the photograph. Then she saw something that made her uncomfortable. Mercer noticed the camera. He looked directly toward Linda. He knew she had taken the picture. Linda said his expression changed. He was no longer calm. He looked angry. Rebecca took the photograph from Linda. She folded it. Then she whispered, "Don't let him know you have another copy." Linda did not understand what she meant. She kept the second copy. For 39 years. Vargas asked why she never gave it to police. Linda looked down. Because Mercer came to my apartment. The room seemed to shrink. She said it happened 2 nights after Rebecca disappeared. Mercer knocked on her door. He asked about the photograph. Linda denied having one. He told her Rebecca had been unstable. He said the police were looking for the wrong person. Then he gave her a warning. If you know what's good for you, forget her. Linda did exactly that. She moved. She changed job. She stopped talking about Rebecca. She kept the photograph hidden. She never told her husband what it meant. Vargas asked whether Mercer had threatened her directly. Linda nodded. He didn't have to. That sentence stayed with the detective. The fear had lasted nearly 4 decades. Now, it was finally breaking. Linda also remembered the conversation between Rebecca and Mercer that night. She could not remember every word, but she remembered one sentence. Rebecca said, "You're not the only one." Mercer responded, "Who else knows?" Rebecca said, "Enough." That exchange changed the motive. Rebecca was not simply confronting Mercer, she was telling him that other people knew about the financial scheme. She had evidence, and she was preparing to expose it. Linda remembered something else. A man entered the restaurant shortly before Rebecca left. He did not sit. He stood near the door. Mercer noticed him. Rebecca noticed him. Linda remembered Mercer becoming nervous. The man wore a dark coat. He said something to Mercer. Only 3 words. "It's handled already." Then he left. Linda never knew who he was. Vargas asked whether she had seen him before. Linda shook her head. No, but she remembered his voice. Low, calm, controlled. The investigation now had a second unknown man, and that man might explain why Rebecca had been killed. Vargas asked Linda whether she had kept anything else. The woman hesitated. Then she pulled another item from the envelope. A receipt, dated August 16th, Sill 1985. It was from the restaurant. On the back was a handwritten number. Linda said Rebecca had written it. She told Linda to keep it safe. Vargas studied the number. It was a telephone number. The area code belonged to San Francisco. Investigators traced it through old telephone records. The number belonged to a private office, a law firm, but the attorney listed on the account had died years ago. His name was Richard Cole. Cole had represented several construction companies. He had also represented the company where Rebecca worked. The connection to the financial scheme became stronger. Vargas searched Cole's records. He found something unexpected. 3 weeks before Rebecca's death, Cole had transferred $25,000 to an account controlled by Daniel Mercer. The payment had been disguised as a consulting fee. It was the same type of transaction Rebecca had been investigating. Money moved. Names changed. Records disappeared. But the pattern remained. Vargas believed Rebecca had discovered a network of financial fraud. Mercer was involved. Cole was involved. Other people may have been involved. And Rebecca had gotten too close. The detective returned to the photograph. The man standing beside Rebecca was Mercer. The man reflected in the window was someone else. The waitress had seen him. Rebecca had seen him. Mercer had seen him. The question was whether investigators could identify him. They enhanced the reflection. The image was damaged, but enough remained to determine his approximate age. Early 40s, tall, dark hair, thin face, dark coat, a distinctive ring on his right hand. Vargas searched photographs of Richard Cole. There it was, the ring. Same design, same finger, same distinctive shape. Cole had been inside the restaurant that night. He had been watching Rebecca, and the old financial records showed he had paid Mercer. The investigation widened again, but Cole was dead. He had died in 1998. Cancer. No opportunity for interrogation. No confession. No explanation. Vargas began searching his old estate records. The family had sold his house after his death. Most documents were destroyed, but one storage unit remained. The unit had been transferred to a legal archive. Inside were boxes of business files. Investigators obtained access. They searched for Rebecca's name. Nothing. They searched for Mercer. Nothing. Then they found a folder labeled with a company code. Inside was a handwritten list. 7 names. Rebecca's name was there. Mercer's name was there. Cole's name was there. And next to Rebecca's name were 2 words. Problem. Contained. Vargas stared at the page. The handwriting appeared to be Cole, but there was no way to prove when it had been written. Then she noticed a date. August 15th, Sill, 1985. 2 days before Rebecca's murder. The investigators now had a possible motive and a possible chain of command, but they still needed to establish what happened after Rebecca left the restaurant. The restaurant's old parking lot had been demolished. The area was now occupied by a bank. Investigators obtained historical aerial photographs. They reconstructed the parking layout, the fruit stand, the restaurant, the main road, the route Rebecca would have taken. Mercer's truck could have followed her without being noticed, but there was another vehicle, a dark sedan. and records showed that Richard Cole had owned one, a dark sedan registered in his name, the same model, the same year, the same color. The timeline became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Rebecca left the restaurant at 6:03. A witness saw a dark sedan following her. Mercer's truck appeared near the fruit stand later that night. Cole's vehicle was never officially examined. Why? Because investigators did not know he was connected. By the time they suspected financial corruption, the vehicle was gone. The evidence had vanished, but the DNA remained. Vargas asked the laboratory whether any additional biological material had been recovered from Rebecca's clothing. There was another sample, a second partial profile. The first belonged to Mercer. The second was incomplete. It could not be identified, but it was male, and it did not match Mercer. Vargas froze. There had been another man in contact with Rebecca. The second profile was compared with known samples from Richard Cole. Cole's medical records contained preserved tissue. The laboratory performed the test. The result was inconclusive. The sample was too degraded. But investigators could not eliminate Cole. They now had two men connected to Rebecca. One was alive at the time and later died. The other was Mercer. Both had financial connections. Both appeared in the photograph. Both had motive. And one of them was dead. The case suddenly looked less like a random murder. It looked organized, planned, controlled. Vargas returned to Linda. She remembered one more detail. The man in the dark coat had told Mercer, "It's handled already." She had assumed he meant the financial problem. Now she wondered whether he meant Rebecca. Linda also remembered Mercer leaving the restaurant. He did not follow Rebecca immediately. He waited. Then he walked outside. A few minutes later, Rebecca left. Mercer followed. The dark sedan followed them both. Linda had seen it through the restaurant window. She had not understood its significance. Now it looked like coordination. Vargas reconstructed the movements. Rebecca's car left first. Mercer followed. Cole followed Mercer. The three vehicles disappeared into the night. Only Rebecca's car would be found again. The next morning, Mercer would be the one to discover it. Vargas now believed the discovery had been staged. Mercer had not accidentally found Rebecca. He had returned to the scene. But why would a killer call police? Because he needed to control the narrative. Because being the person who discovers a body can make you look innocent. It can also give you access to the crime scene before investigators arrive. Vargas reviewed the evidence again. Mercer's fingerprints were absent from the car. That had seemed suspicious. But if he had worn gloves, it made sense. He had claimed he never touched the vehicle, but he knew the victim's hands were closed. He knew details that were never released. He knew the exact location, and his DNA was on Rebecca. The detective now believed the original investigation had been manipulated from the beginning. The killer had not simply escaped. He had helped shape the story. That explained why so many early assumptions had pointed away from Mercer. He had appeared helpful, calm, concerned, cooperative. Exactly what investigators expected from an innocent witness. But Vargas still needed to prove that Mercer had killed Rebecca. The DNA was powerful. The photograph was powerful. The financial records were powerful. But together they still did not reveal the entire sequence. Then the forensic team discovered something buried in the old evidence box. A small piece of metal. A broken clasp. It had been recovered from Rebecca's clothing. The original report described it as unidentified. Vargas sent it for modern analysis. The result came back 48 hours later. It matched a clasp from a workman's key ring. The manufacturer had stopped producing it decades ago. Investigators searched old photographs of Mercer. There he was. The same key ring hanging from his belt. The same clasp. The same metal shape. The fragment had broken during a struggle. Rebecca had torn it from him, and she had held onto it. The evidence was becoming overwhelming, but one question remained. What had happened to the second man? Vargas searched Richard Cole's estate records again. She found a travel document. August 18th, Sill, 1985. A flight from San Francisco to Mexico City. Passenger name, Richard Cole. He had left California the day after Rebecca's murder. He never returned to the United States, at least not under that name. Investigators searched immigration records. There was no clear return. Cole died 13 years later overseas. If he had been involved, he had escaped justice completely. But there was still another name in the financial records. A name Vargas had seen before. A name connected to Cole. A name that appeared beside a large payment made 3 days before Rebecca's death. The payment was for $50,000, and the recipient was not Mercer, not Cole, not the construction company. It was a private investigator, a former police officer. His name was Frank Dalton. Vargas searched the old case file. Dalton had been interviewed in 1985. He had claimed he was investigating an unrelated insurance fraud, but his report contained no mention of Rebecca, no mention of Mercer, no mention of Cole. Yet his name was now sitting inside the same financial network. The detective requested Dalton's original interview. One sentence immediately stood out. Dalton had said, "I never met Rebecca Hale." Vargas checked his phone record. That statement was false. Dalton had called Rebecca twice. Once 3 days before her death. Once the afternoon she disappeared. And the second call lasted 11 minutes. The case had just opened another door. Mercer may have been the man who killed Rebecca. Cole may have ordered the operation, but Dalton might have been watching her. And if that was true, the murder had never been a simple confrontation. It had been planned. The question now was who gave the final order. Vargas stared at the old photograph one more time. Rebecca stood smiling. Mercer stood beside her. The scratched-out face was gone. The truth was beginning to return. But the photograph still contained one final detail. On Rebecca's wrist was a thin bracelet. The bracelet had never been recovered, and according to her family, Rebecca had only received it 3 days before her death. The person who gave it to her was not Mercer. It was someone else. Someone whose name appeared nowhere in the original investigation. And when Vargas finally discovered who that person was, the entire murder would take a darker turn. The bracelet became the next door into the case. Rebecca's brother was certain about one thing. She had not owned it for years. She had received it only days before she died. He remembered because Rebecca had shown it to their mother. A thin silver chain, a small oval pendant. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic, but there was a tiny symbol engraved on the back. A single letter, E. The family assumed it had been a gift from someone Rebecca was dating. She never explained. When investigators searched her apartment in 1985, the bracelet was missing. For decades, nobody mentioned it. Now Vargas wanted to know who had given it to her. She began with Rebecca's closest friend. One remembered seeing the bracelet. Another remembered Rebecca refusing to say who gave it to her. Then Susan Miller remembered something. Rebecca had received a package at work. No return address. No company name. Just her name written across the front. Rebecca opened it privately. Inside was the bracelet. There was also a note. Susan had never seen the note, but she remembered Rebecca's reaction. She had gone pale. Then she folded the paper and put it in her purse. Susan asked what was wrong. Rebecca said only, "He found me." At the time, Susan assumed Rebecca meant an old boyfriend. Now those words sounded different. Vargas searched Rebecca's financial records for purchases connected to jewelry store. Nothing. She checked mail records. Nothing. Then she examined the photograph again. The bracelet was visible. Rebecca was wearing it when she met Mercer at the restaurant. That meant the bracelet was not merely connected to the murder. It was connected to the final hours of Rebecca's life. Vargas enlarged the pendant. The letter E was clear, but beneath it was something else. A tiny number. E17. The detective searched the financial records. There was an account labeled E17. It belonged to a company that had never appeared in the original investigation. The company was registered in Nevada. It had no employee, no physical office. Its listed director was Richard Cole. Vargas stared at the screen. The bracelet had led back to Cole, the dead attorney, the man in the restaurant photograph, the man who had transferred money to Mercer, the man who had left California the day after Rebecca disappeared. But there was another surprise. The company had been incorporated only 6 months before Rebecca's murder. Its purpose was listed as consultant. Its actual transactions told a different story. Large amounts of money moved through the account: construction contracts, insurance payments, cash withdrawals, payments to private investigators, payments to Mercer, and one payment to Frank Dalton, the same former police officer who had lied about knowing Rebecca. The network was becoming visible. Cole appeared to sit at the center. Mercer was involved on the ground. Dalton was watching. Rebecca had discovered the money. She had started asking questions. Then she died. Vargas requested Dalton's records. He was still alive, 81 years old, living in Arizona. He had retired from private investigations decades earlier. When contacted, he refused an interview. His attorney sent a statement. Dalton denied any involvement. He said the payment had been for legitimate investigative work. He claimed he had never met Rebecca, but the old phone records contradicted him. Vargas obtained authorization to question him. Dalton finally agreed. The interview took place in a quiet room at a police facility. He arrived using a cane. He looked frail, almost harmless. But when Vargas placed the photograph of Rebecca on the table, his expression changed. She noticed immediately. He knew her. Vargas asked him why he had lied. Dalton stared at the photograph. "I didn't kill her." It was not an answer. Vargas repeated the question. Dalton said he had been hired to follow Rebecca. By whom? He refused to say. Vargas placed the financial records before him. The $50,000 payment. The E-17 account. Cole's name. Dalton looked at the documents. Then he whispered, "Cole." The name had finally been spoken by someone who had been there. Dalton said Cole hired him to watch Rebecca. He said Cole believed she had copied sensitive financial records. Dalton's job was simple. Find out what she knew. Find out who she had told. Keep her under observation. But Dalton insisted he was not involved in the murder. He said he followed Rebecca to the restaurant. He saw her meet Mercer. He saw Cole arrive. He watched from outside. Then he left. Vargas asked why he had lied for 39 years. Dalton answered, "Because I was paid to forget." The detective asked whether Cole had ordered Rebecca killed. Dalton hesitated. Then he said something chilling. "Cole didn't give orders in words." "What does that mean?" "He didn't have to." Dalton described Cole as a man who spoke indirectly, a man who expected people to understand what he wanted without saying it. Before Rebecca disappeared, Dalton said Cole had told him, "She needs to stop." Dalton understood the meaning. He knew it was a warning, but he did nothing. Vargas asked about Mercer. Dalton said Mercer was the one who became upset. He believed Rebecca was going to expose him. He was afraid. He was angry. And unlike Cole, Mercer was impulsive. Dalton claimed Cole wanted Rebecca frightened. Mercer wanted her silent. The distinction mattered. Vargas asked about the night of the murder. Dalton finally described what he saw. Rebecca left the restaurant. Mercer followed. Dalton followed Mercer. Then a dark sedan appeared. Cole was driving. The three vehicles moved toward the industrial district. Dalton said he stopped following them near the highway. He never saw Rebecca again, but he received another payment 2 days later, $50,000, the same amount appearing in the E-17 records. Vargas asked what the money was for. Dalton said he assumed it was payment for his silence. He never asked. He never wanted to know. Then Vargas placed the bracelet photograph in front of him. "Did you know about this?" Dalton stared at it. His face changed. "Yes." "Who gave it to Rebecca?" He looked away. "Cole." The room became silent. Dalton explained that Cole had given Rebecca the bracelet as a test. The pendant contained a coded reference to one of the financial accounts. Rebecca did not know what it meant. She thought it might be a warning, but Cole knew that if she investigated the symbol, she would find the money trail. The bracelet had been bait. Rebecca had followed the trail. She discovered E-17. She discovered Mercer. She discovered payments. And she realized someone had been watching her. That was why she became frightened. That was why she began documenting everything. That was why she arranged the meeting with Mercer. She was trying to find out who was behind the scheme. Vargas asked Dalton whether Rebecca knew Cole was involved. He said yes. By the final week, she knew. That explained the photograph. Rebecca wanted proof. She asked Linda to take the picture. She wanted evidence that Mercer and Cole were connected. She knew something was coming. She just did not know how quickly. Vargas asked Dalton about the missing purse. He said Mercer took it. The wallet, the keys, the documents, everything. But he said Cole wanted one thing in particular, the bracelet. Why? Because the bracelet could connect him to Rebecca. Dalton said Mercer was supposed to retrieve it, but he never returned it. Vargas asked where it was. Dalton shook his head. I don't know. The detective leaned forward. You knew about the bracelet. Yes. You knew Cole gave it to her. Yes. You knew Mercer was involved. Yes. You knew Rebecca was being watched. Yes. And you still told police you never met her. Dalton looked directly at Vargas. I was afraid. The answer was almost identical to Linda. Fear. That word appeared again and again. Fear had protected the killer. Fear had protected the financial network. Fear had protected people who knew pieces of the truth. And fear had allowed the case to remain cold. But Dalton had one more thing to reveal. He said there was a second photograph. A photograph taken after Rebecca left the restaurant. He had seen it. Cole had it. The image showed Rebecca walking toward her car. Mercer was behind her. The dark sedan was parked across the street, and another man stood beside the sedan. Dalton had never identified him, but he remembered one detail. The man was wearing a police-style jacket. Vargas immediately asked whether he was an officer. Dalton said he did not know, but he believed the man had been connected to the police. The revelation shook the investigation. Someone connected to law enforcement might have been involved. Vargas reviewed the original case. 3 officers had been assigned to the murder investigation. 1 had retired. 1 had died. The 3rd had resigned 6 months after the case went cold. His name was Robert Ellison. Vargas searched his personnel file. Ellison had been the detective who interviewed Daniel Mercer. He had also signed the report declaring Mercer cooperative and credible. That was not unusual. But there was something else. Ellison had been listed as a recipient of a $12,000 consulting payment from one of Cole's companies. The payment occurred for months after the murder. The original investigators had never known. Vargas stared at the record. The case had just become more dangerous. A private investigator, a construction attorney, a delivery driver, a missing bracelet, a hidden financial network, and now a former detective connected by money. The cold case was no longer simply about identifying a killer. It was about discovering how an entire investigation had been steered away from him. Vargas requested Ellison's old interview. The retired detective was still alive, 79 years old, living in a quiet community outside Sacramento. When Vargas called, Ellison refused to discuss the case. Then she mentioned the DNA. He became silent. She mentioned Mercer. Silence. Then she mentioned Cole. The line went dead. Vargas called again. No answer. A warrant was prepared for financial records. But before investigators could execute it, Ellison disappeared. His house was empty. His car was gone. His phone was disconnected. His neighbors said he had left the previous night. No one knew where he had gone. Investigators searched his home. They found old case files. Several belonged to Rebecca. One envelope contained photographs. Another contained handwritten notes. And inside a locked desk drawer was a small evidence bag. The label read, B. Hale Personal Effects. Inside was a silver bracelet. The missing bracelet. E17. The same bracelet Rebecca had been wearing the night she died. For 39 years, everyone believed it was gone. It had never left the hands of the people who controlled the investigation. And on the back of the pendant, beneath the engraved symbol, investigators found something they had never noticed, a tiny second engraving. 3 initials. Ray. Robert Ellison. The retired detective had possessed Rebecca's bracelet for 39 years, and now he was missing. The search for Robert Ellison began before sunrise. By 5:12 a.m., patrol units were checking the roads around his neighborhood. By 6 o'clock, investigators had contacted airports. By 7:30, his vehicle was found abandoned near an old highway interchange. The driver's door was unlocked. The engine was cold. On the passenger seat sat a folded newspaper. The headline was about the reopening of Rebecca Hale's murder case. Someone had circled Rebecca's name in black ink. Nothing else was inside the car. No wallet, no phone, no luggage, no indication where Ellison had gone. Then investigators opened the trunk. Inside was a cardboard box. The box contained copies of old police reports, photographs, a cassette recorder, and a handwritten notebook. The first page contained only one sentence. I should have stopped it in 1985. Elena Vargas read the sentence twice. Then she turned the page. The notebook was not a diary. It was a record. Dates, names, payments, meetings, places. Ellison had been keeping track of the people connected to the case, and the first name on the list was Daniel Mercer. Next came Richard Cole, then Frank Dalton. Then 3 names Vargas did not recognize. The 4th name made her stop. Charles Hale, Rebecca's father. Vargas immediately wondered whether Rebecca's father had been involved. The question was uncomfortable, but the notebook suggested something complicated. Beside Charles Hale's name, Ellison had written, "Paid to cooperate." No amount, no explanation, just those words. Vargas contacted Rebecca's brother again. He was shocked. He insisted their father would never hurt Rebecca, but when asked about Daniel Mercer, he remembered something strange. Their father had known Mercer for years, and after Rebecca disappeared, their father had told the family not to speak publicly about the construction company. He had said it would only make things worse. At the time, everyone assumed he was trying to protect the family. Now Vargas wondered whether he knew more. She searched Charles Hale's old financial records. He had received a payment from one of Cole's companies, $18,000. The payment occurred 2 weeks after Rebecca's death. The description was vague, consulting. Vargas felt the case shift again. Rebecca had been investigating financial corruption. Her father had received money. Mercer had received money. Dalton had received money. Ellison had received money. Cole appeared to be paying people connected to Rebecca. But why would Rebecca's father accept money after his daughter was murdered? There had to be an explanation, or another secret. Vargas returned to Ellison's notebook. Near the back, one page contained a rough diagram. 5 names, 5 arrows. At the center was a single word, E17. One arrow pointed toward Mercer, another toward Cole, another toward Dalton, another toward Ellison. The final arrow pointed toward Charles Hale. Then, underneath, Ellison had written, "Rebecca knew." That sentence changed everything. Rebecca may have known that her father was involved in the financial scheme. Maybe that was why she had been investigating. Maybe the murder was not simply about protecting money. Maybe it was about protecting a family secret. Vargas needed answers. But Charles Hale had died in 2003. The only person who could explain his involvement was Rebecca's brother. He agreed to meet again. This time, he brought a box from his father's house. He had kept it for years. Inside were old letters, tax documents, photographs, and a cassette tape. He said he had never listened to it. It had been labeled in his father's handwriting. August 1985. Vargas found an old cassette player. The tape clicked. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice appeared. Charles Hale. His voice sounded tired. He was speaking to someone. The recording began in the middle of the conversation. "We never agreed to this." A second voice answered. A male voice. Calm. Controlled. Vargas recognized it immediately. Richard Cole. Charles said, "You promised nobody would get hurt." Cole replied, "That was before Rebecca found the account." There was a pause. Then Charles said, "She is my daughter." Cole answered, "Then you should be the one talking to her." The tape continued. Charles sounded frightened. "I can't control her." Cole replied, "Then someone else will." The recording ended. Vargas stared at the machine. For the first time, the investigation had a direct recording connecting Cole to Rebecca's danger, but it still did not prove who killed her. The tape continued on a second side. Vargas turned it over. The recording resumed. Charles was speaking again. I won't help you. Cole said, You already did. Then Charles asked, What about the money? Cole laughed quietly. That money was never for you. Charles asked what would happen if he went to police. Cole answered, Then the next person disappears. The tape ended. Nobody spoke. Rebecca's brother covered his face. For decades he had believed his father had simply been greedy. Now he was learning that his father had been afraid, terrified, and possibly trapped. The $18,000 payment suddenly made sense. It may not have been a reward. It may have been blackmail or protection money. Vargas searched the financial records again. The payment was made by a company controlled by Cole. The account description had been changed twice, but the original transfer code contained the same E17 designation. The money was part of the same system. Vargas returned to Ellison's notebook. There was another entry. Father paid after murder. Underneath, not willing participant. The former detective had apparently reached the same conclusion. Charles Hale had been forced into cooperation, but that still left the most important question. What had happened on the night Rebecca died? Vargas reconstructed the timeline from every surviving source. At 5:11 p.m., Rebecca left work. At 5:24, she stopped for gas. At 5:41, she entered the diner. At 6:03, she met Mercer. At approximately 6:10, Cole arrived. At 6:17, Rebecca left. Mercer followed. Cole followed Mercer. Dalton watched from a distance. At some point, Rebecca drove toward the industrial district. Then the timeline disappeared. But Ellison's notebook contained a location, a road outside town. Beside it were two words, second meeting. Investigators drove there. The road had changed. A shopping center now occupied the area, but old property records showed that in 1985, the land contained a storage facility. One building remained, an old concrete warehouse. Vargas entered with a forensic team. The building had been renovated, but one wall was original. Investigators scanned it. Nothing. Then they found a narrow underground access tunnel. It had been sealed for decades. Inside was a small storage room. Dust, broken crates, old construction materials, and a metal filing cabinet. The cabinet was locked. The key was found nearby. Inside were financial records. Not copies, originals. Payments, names, account numbers, dates. The E17 network. Vargas realized they had found the place where the financial operation had been managed. But there was something else. A handwritten calendar. August 17th Sil, 1985. The date was circled. Next to it, RH 8:30. Rebecca Hale, 8:30 p.m. The meeting time. But Rebecca's car had been found much earlier. That meant something had happened before the scheduled meeting. Maybe she had been intercepted. Maybe the meeting had been moved. Or maybe 8:30 was the time she was supposed to disappear. Investigators searched the room again. Near the floor was a rusted metal bracket. The forensic team examined it. There were scratches, tiny traces of blood. The material was too degraded for a full profile. But one thing remained. A fragment of fabric. Gray. The same gray fabric seen in the photograph. Vargas looked at the wall. Then she noticed a small rectangular outline where something had once been mounted. A security camera. There had been a camera inside the warehouse. The original system was gone, but investigators found the old wire, and beneath the floorboards they discovered a damaged Cosette tape. The tape was labeled with one date, August 17th. Vargas sent it to the laboratory. The recording was badly damaged. Most of it was static, but technicians recovered several minutes of audio. At first, there was only machinery, then footsteps, a door opening, a woman's voice. Rebecca, you told me this was over. A man's voice. Mercer, it isn't over. Rebecca said, I have copies. Mercer answered, who else knows? Rebecca replied, my brother. A pause. Then another voice entered. Cole. Rebecca. She immediately became silent. Cole spoke calmly. You made a mistake. Rebecca answered, no, you did. There was movement. A chair scraped across the floor. Rebecca said, "If you touch me, everyone gets the file." Cole replied, "You don't understand what you found." Then the recording became distorted. A loud impact. Rebecca screamed. Another sound. Then silence. The audio ended. The room went completely quiet. The investigators had just recovered something the original case had never possessed. A recording of Rebecca alive inside the warehouse. A confrontation. 3 voices. Mercer, Cole, Rebecca, and then a violent struggle. But the tape did not capture the killing itself. The final seconds were missing. Vargas ordered the audio enhanced. Technicians isolated the background. A 4th voice appeared, very faint, almost buried beneath the static. A man saying, "Take her out back." Vargas froze. The voice did not belong to Mercer. It did not belong to Cole. It was someone else. The laboratory attempted a voice comparison. The sample was too short, but investigators could determine one thing. The speaker was male, and the voice sounded familiar. Vargas returned to Ellison's notebook. She searched every name. Then she found the one person who had been present at the warehouse according to the original evidence. A patrol officer, Officer James Warren. He had responded to the original crime scene. He had arrived 6 minutes after Mercer called police. He had been one of the first officers to see Rebecca, and according to the dispatch records, he had arrived in a police vehicle that had not been assigned to him. Vargas pulled his personnel records. James Warren had left the department in 1987, 2 years after Rebecca's murder. He moved to Nevada, changed his name, and vanished. But Ellison had written something beside his name. 3 words. Warren knows everything. The cold case had now reached beyond the original suspects. The evidence pointed toward a hidden network, and somewhere inside that network was a former police officer who had disappeared shortly after the murder. Vargas searched Nevada records. She found a possible match. A man living under a different name, 78 years old, former law enforcement, former security consultant, and still alive. The DNA evidence had exposed one kill. The warehouse tape had exposed another secret. But the disappearance of James Warren suggested something even darker. The murder had not been hidden by one man. It had been protected by several. And now, after 39 years, the last surviving witness was living under a different name, unaware that investigators had finally found him. The man living under the name James Ward was 78 years old. He lived alone in a small desert community outside Reno. No criminal record. No public scandals. No obvious connection to California. For decades, he had built a quiet life around one decision: never talk about 1985. Vargas arrived at his house just after sunrise. She did not knock immediately. She stood beside the patrol vehicle and looked at the address. Then she looked at the photograph of the younger man, James Warren. The face was thinner now. The hair was white, but the eyes were unmistakable. She knocked. Several seconds passed. The door opened. Warren looked at her, then at the badge, then at the photograph in her hand. His expression changed. He knew why she had come. He stepped backward. "She's finally been found," he said. Vargas did not ask who he meant. Rebecca. Warren looked toward the floor. She never stopped waiting. Those words were strange. Vargas entered. The house was almost empty. A table, 2 chairs, a television, old photographs. On the wall was a framed police badge. Warren had kept it. Vargas placed the warehouse photograph on the table, then the image of Mercer, then the photograph of Cole. Finally, the old bracelet. Warren stared at it for several seconds. "Where did you get that?" "Your former partner kept it." Warren closed his eyes. "Ellison." The name seemed to hurt. He was supposed to destroy it. Vargas leaned forward. "Destroy what?" "The evidence." The answer came without hesitation. Warren knew the case was over. There was no reason to lie anymore. At least, that was what Vargas thought. He began talking. In 1985, Warren was not a detective. He was a patrol officer. But he had been taking side payments from Richard Cole. Cole used him for information, police schedules, search warrants. names of witnesses, anything that could help him stay ahead of investigation. Warren said he never considered himself corrupt. He called it favors. Then came Rebecca. She had discovered the E-17 account. She had copies of documents. She knew money was moving through shell companies. She knew Mercer was involved. And she knew someone inside the police department was feeding information to Cole. That person was Warren. Rebecca had apparently learned his name. That made her dangerous. Warren said Cole did not initially want her kid. He wanted the documents. He wanted Rebecca frightened. He wanted her to stop. But Mercer was different. Mercer believed Rebecca was going to expose him. He became increasingly desperate. Warren said Mercer had approached him days before the murder. He asked Warren what police would do if Rebecca disappeared. Warren told him they would investigate. Mercer laughed. Then he asked, "What if they don't find anything?" Warren understood the question. He should have walked away. Instead, he accepted money. On August 17th, Warren received a call. Cole told him there had been an incident. Warren was instructed to respond to the industrial error, not as an investigator, as a police officer. He was supposed to make sure the scene looked like a random kill, but when Warren arrived, Rebecca was already dead. Mercer was there. Cole was there. And the body was inside the warehouse. Warren said he never saw who struck her. He claimed Mercer was standing over her. Cole was holding the financial documents. Warren said Rebecca was still alive for several minutes. She was barely conscious. She looked at Warren, and she recognized his uniform. She whispered, "Please." Warren said he did nothing. That was the part he remembered most. Not the blood. Not the warehouse. Not Mercer. Rebecca looking at him. Knowing he was a police officer. Knowing he could help. And watching him turn away. Warren said Cole ordered Mercer to move the body. They wrapped Rebecca in a tarp. They placed her inside a vehicle. Warren stayed behind. He said he could not bring himself to participate further, but he still accepted the money. He still helped them. He still lied. Vargas asked about the fruit stand. Warren said Mercer chose it. It was isolated. The location was familiar. Mercer believed the body would be discovered quickly. That was important. A body hidden too well could create suspicion. A body found quickly could create confusion. Mercer wanted police to believe the murder had happened somewhere else. Warren said Mercer drove Rebecca's car to the fruit stand. Then he called police. But before he made the call, he returned to the warehouse. He removed several pieces of evidence. The bracelet, Rebecca's purse, the photograph, financial documents. He also cleaned the vehicle. But he missed something. The DNA. Warren looked at Vargas. Mercer thought he had cleaned everything. He hadn't. No. Vargas asked why the DNA had never been discovered. Warren said the sample had been collected, but the original detective did not know what it meant. The evidence was placed into storage. Nobody had technology capable of using it. Warren had assumed it would never matter. Then Vargas asked the question that had haunted the case. Why did Mercer become the person who found the body? Warren answered immediately. Because he wanted to be the first person police believed. He said Mercer knew how investigations work. He knew officers would treat the discoverer as a witness. He knew his story would become the starting point. He also knew the route. Mercer had arranged for the delivery route to change. Rebecca's father was used as part of the plan. Warren said Charles Hale had been pressured. Cole threatened Rebecca's family. Charles was told that if he refused to cooperate, his son would be targeted. So he requested the route change. He did not know Mercer intended to kill Rebecca. He believed he was helping arrange a meeting. Vargas asked about the recording. Warren admitted he knew it existed. Cole had installed the recorder inside the warehouse. He wanted proof that Rebecca had agreed to hand over the documents. Instead, the recording captured the confrontation, and it captured the final order. Take her out back. Warren said the voice belonged to Richard Cole, but he insisted Cole did not physically kill Rebecca. Mercer did. That distinction mattered legally. The prosecutor would need to establish who caused the fatal injury. Warren said he saw Mercer holding the weapon, a heavy metal tool, a construction hammer. Rebecca had tried to escape. Mercer struck her. Warren looked away. Then came another blow. He heard Rebecca fall. That was when the recording stopped. Vargas asked where the weapon went. Warren said Mercer threw it into a drainage canal. Investigators searched the canal decades later. Nothing remained. But Warren knew something else. Mercer had cut his hand during the struggle. That explained the DNA. He had bled onto Rebecca's clothing. He also explained the broken clasp. Rebecca had torn it from Mercer's key ring. The case was finally beginning to make sense. But Vargas had one more question. Why had Ellison kept the bracelet? Warren said Ellison had been ordered to destroy it. He couldn't. He believed keeping it was the only way to remember what had happened. Ellison had carried the guilt for decades. The notebook was his confession without word. Warren looked toward the old police badge on the wall. I should have gone to prison in 1985. Vargas said, Why didn't you? He answered, Because everyone protected everyone else. Cole paid Mercer. Cole paid Dalton. Cole paid Warren. Ellison accepted money. Charles Hale was threatened. And the original investigation was quietly redirected. Vargas asked whether anyone else knew. Warren said there was one more person, a woman, someone who worked for Cole. She handled the accounts. She knew every payment. She knew every name. And she was still alive. Vargas asked for the name. Warren hesitated. Then he wrote it on a piece of paper. Margaret Sloan. Vargas recognized the name. Sloan had been the accountant who originally told police Rebecca was investigating financial irregularity. She had seemed cooperative, helpful, almost too helpful. Now Vargas understood why. Sloan had been inside the E-17 operation. She knew exactly where the money went. Warren said Sloan had kept a second set of records, a backup ledger. Cole never knew about it. Vargas asked where it was. Warren pointed toward a locked cabinet in California. Where? Under the floor of Cole's old office. The old office had been demolished years earlier, but property records showed one portion of the foundation remained beneath a new building. Vargas returned to California. A forensic team began examining the foundation. They found nothing for hours. Then a technician noticed a section of concrete that had been repaired differently from the surrounding floor. The concrete was removed. Beneath it was a steel container. Inside was a ledger, original pages, bank numbers, names, payments, dates, and a final entry dated August 18th Sil, 1985, the morning after Rebecca's murder. Next to the payment was a handwritten note. Problem solved. Below it were 4 initials: RC, DM, FD, JW, Richard Cole, Daniel Mercer, Frank Dalton, James Warren. The 4 men were now directly connected to the cover-up, but the ledger contained one final name, a 5th initial: CH, Charles Hale. Vargas stared at the page. The family had believed Charles was only a victim. The ledger suggested otherwise. He had received money. He had participated. But the next page explained why. Cole had written, Father secured cooperation. Then, threat remains effective. Charles had not joined willingly. He had been trapped. But another entry appeared below. Rebecca must be dealt with. There was no signature, no initials, but the handwriting appeared consistent with Cole. The prosecutor now had evidence of conspiracy, but the central question remained: who killed Rebecca? Warren had said Mercer. The DNA supported Mercer. The broken clasp supported Mercer. The photograph supported Mercer. The warehouse recording placed Mercer with Rebecca. And now investigators had the missing bracelet. The case was no longer a mystery about an unknown killer. The evidence was converging on one man, Daniel Mercer. But investigators were not finished, because the ledger contained one final document, a photograph, Rebecca's missing purse, and inside the purse was a letter. The letter was addressed to her brother. It had never been mailed. The first line read, If something happens to me, don't trust the police. Vargas stopped reading. The next line was even more disturbing. Dad knows why. The final sentence was unfinished. The ink stopped halfway through the page. Rebecca had been writing it shortly before her death, and beneath the unfinished sentence was a name. Not Mercer, not Cole, not Warren, a name investigators had never seen before. Her father's, Charles Hale. The cold case had been reopened. The killer had been identified. The cover-up had been exposed. But Rebecca's final letter suggested that her family had been carrying a secret of its own. And if that secret was true, the murder had begun long before the night she disappeared. The name at the bottom of Rebecca S. unfinished letter was not enough to accuse her father of anything, but it was enough to make investigators stop. Charles Hale had been dead for more than 20 years. He could not explain himself. He could not deny the payments. He could not explain the recording, and he could not answer the question that had now become central to the case. What did Rebecca mean when she wrote, "Dad knows what"? Vargas returned to the family. Rebecca's brother sat across from her, staring at the letter. He had never seen it. He read the first line again. "If something happens to me, don't trust the police." Then the second. "Dad knows why." He looked up. "My father never told me." Vargas asked what he knew about his father's relationship with Richard Cole. The answer came slowly. Charles had worked for a construction supplier connected to Cole. He had met Cole through business. At first, everything seemed normal. Then money began disappearing. Charles discovered irregularities. He confronted Cole. Cole threatened him. According to the brother, Charles became terrified. He started keeping records. He began hiding documents around the house. Rebecca eventually found them. That was when she became involved. The brother remembered an argument between Rebecca and their father 2 weeks before her death. He had been upstairs. He heard Rebecca shouting. She said, "You knew?" Charles replied, "I was trying to protect you." Rebecca screamed back, "You protected yourself." Then there was silence. The brother never learned what the argument was about. Now the words were impossible to ignore. Vargas asked whether Charles had ever mentioned Daniel Mercer. The brother shook his head. But then he remembered a photograph. It had been taken at a company picnic. Charles stood beside several employees. Daniel Mercer was among them. Richard Cole was there too, and Rebecca was standing at the edge of the group. The brother had never noticed anything unusual. Vargas examined the photograph. Cole was holding a folder. Mercer was watching Rebecca. Charles was looking toward Cole. The image suddenly felt less like a family photograph. It looked like a map. Every important person was standing in one frame, and Rebecca was the only one looking directly at the camera. Investigators searched Charles Hale's old house. The property had been sold years earlier, but the family still owned a storage shed on the land. Inside were boxes that had not been opened since the 1990s. One contained old business correspondence. Another contained tax records. Then investigators found a sealed envelope. On the front were 3 words, "Rebecca, emergency." The envelope had never been opened. Inside was a second key, a small brass key, and a handwritten note. Locker 214. Vargas searched old property records. Locker 214 belonged to a storage facility that had closed in 1994. The company had transferred abandoned units to a warehouse. The facility still existed under another name. Investigators located the records. Locker 214 had been rented under Charles Hale's name. The rental began 6 months before Rebecca's death. The payments continued for 3 years. Nobody in the family knew about it. The storage unit was opened. Inside were boxes, financial records, photographs, letters, a tape recorder, and a second ledger. This one was different from Cola. It contained Charles Hale's handwriting, names, dates, payments, but it also contained something shocking. Charles had been tracking the entire E-17 operation. He had recorded every payment, every threat, every meeting. He had evidence against Cole, against Mercer, against Dalton, against Warren, and he had documented his own involvement, but he had also written why he participated. One sentence appeared repeatedly. "Rebecca is the leverage." Vargas stopped. The phrase made no sense. Why would Charles describe his own daughter as leverage? Then the documents explained it. Years before the murder, Charles had borrowed money from Cole to save his struggling business. The debt grew. Cole eventually demanded favor. Charles provided information. He helped conceal fraudulent transactions. He introduced Mercer to the company. He allowed Cole access to internal records. He became part of the machine. But Rebecca discovered the truth. Charles knew she was going to expose everything. He tried to stop her, not because he wanted her dead, because he believed he could negotiate with Cole. That was the mistake. He told Cole that Rebecca could be controlled. Cole believed him. And when she refused, the situation escalated. Vargas found another letter. Charles had written it after Rebecca's death. It was addressed to his son, but it had never been sent. The letter began, "I failed her. Then, I thought I could keep her safe by giving them what they wanted. Then, I was wrong." Charles admitted that he had arranged the meeting between Rebecca and Mercer. He believed Mercer wanted to frighten her. He believed Cole would pressure her to surrender the documents. He did not know Mercer intended to kill her. The letter continued. "When I understood what they had done, it was already too late." Charles said he had considered going to police, but Warren was already inside the department. Cole knew where the family lived, and Rebecca's brother was still young. Charles was threatened. He was told that if he spoke, his son would disappear. So he stayed silent. That silence lasted 18 years, until his death. The storage unit contained one final cassette. Vargas played it. Charles was speaking. His voice shook. "I know who killed Rebecca." A pause. "Daniel Mercer struck her." Another pause. Cole ordered it. Then, Warren made sure nobody would stop them. The recording was devastating. But Charles added something else. Dalton watched. He had known. He had been terrified. But he had also accepted the money. The recording ended. Vargas now had a direct confession from a dead witness. The prosecution had evidence, but the defense would argue that Charles was not present. His account could be based on what he later learned. It could not alone establish what happened inside the warehouse. That was why the DNA mattered. The physical evidence connected Mercer directly to Rebecca. The recording placed Mercer inside the warehouse. The bracelet connected Cole. The ledger connected the money. And Warren's confession explained the cover-up. The case had become a chain. Every link strengthened the next. But there was still one major problem. Daniel Mercer was dead. He had died in 2016. He could not be arrested. He could not stand trial. The title of the case had already begun circulating in the media. Cold case solved. But technically, the killer was dead. Investigators still wanted to know whether anyone else could be prosecuted. Richard Cole was dead. Frank Dalton was elderly but alive. James Warren was alive and potentially responsible for helping conceal the murder. But the strongest evidence against them involved a crime nearly 4 decades old. Prosecutors began examining statutes of limitation. Murder had no limitation. Conspiracy might be more complicated. Evidence tampering might be time-barred. But if the conduct continued after the murder, new legal questions appeared. The key was the body. If people knowingly concealed evidence of the murder for decades, prosecutors needed to determine whether any of those actions created separate offenses. Warren was now cooperating. Dalton was cooperating. But both were protecting themselves. Each claimed they were not involved in the killing. That left Mercer as the central perpetrator. Then Vargas found something unexpected. A handwritten confession. Not from Mercer, from Frank Dalton. It was dated 1992. He had written it after a period of heavy drinking. The document had never been sent. It described the night Rebecca died. Dalton wrote that he watched Mercer attack her. He wrote that Cole was present. He wrote that Warren arrived afterward. He wrote that they moved the body. And he wrote one sentence that changed the case. Mercer was not supposed to kill her. According to Dalton, the original plan was to force Rebecca to surrender the documents. Cole wanted her frightened. He wanted her silent. Mercer lost control. The murder was not part of the original plan. It was an escalation. That distinction mattered. It meant the conspiracy had existed before the killing. The murder was the result. Dalton also described the moment Rebecca realized she had been betrayed. She looked toward Charles. She had expected her father to help her. Instead, Charles stood outside the warehouse. He did not enter. Dalton wrote that Rebecca shouted his name. Charles turned away. That image stayed with Dalton for decades. A daughter calling for her father, a father unable to save her, a police officer standing nearby, a private investigator watching, and a man holding the weapon. The evidence was no longer just a collection of clues, it was a sequence. Rebecca discovered the money. She confronted her father. Charles tried to protect himself and his family. Cole intervened. Mercer became involved. Dalton watched. Warren protected the operation. Rebecca was killed. The body was moved. The investigation was manipulated. And the truth disappeared. But not completely. One piece remained. The DNA. Vargas returned to the laboratory. The scientists had been able to extract another genetic profile from the evidence. This one came from a small stain on the inside of Rebecca's esp. It matched Mercer. The first sample had come from her clothing. The second came from the purse. To separate locations. To separate pieces of evidence. Both connected to Mercer. That made accidental transfer almost impossible. Then the laboratory found something else. A tiny fragment of skin beneath Rebecca's fingernail. The DNA was degraded, but it was male. The profile was consistent with Mercer. The investigators now had biological evidence suggesting Rebecca had fought him. The broken keyring clasp supported it. The injury supported it. The audio supported it. Dalton's confession supported it. Warren's confession supported it. Charles's recording supported it. The case was finally becoming undeniable, but Vargas still wanted one final confirmation. She wanted to know exactly how Mercer had killed Rebecca. The warehouse audio contained the sound of a metal object striking something. Investigators compared the sound with different tools. The original evidence inventory listed a missing construction hammer. It had belonged to Mercer's employee. The hammer had been checked out 3 days before the murder. It was never returned. The company records showed Mercer had signed for it. The tool had disappeared. Investigators searched old photographs of Mercer's home. In one image from 1986, a toolbox was visible in the background. Inside it was a hammer. The same model. The handle had a distinctive crack. A forensic specialist compared the photograph with surviving records from the manufacturer. The model matched the missing tool, but the hammer itself was gone. No weapon. No body. No direct murder weapon. Only the photograph. The evidence was still enough. Then came the final breakthrough. Investigators located a retired construction worker who had known Mercer. The man remembered something. A week after Rebecca's death, Mercer asked him for help disposing of an old hammer. The worker refused. He said Mercer looked nervous. He asked why. Mercer answered, because someone got hurt. The worker never reported it. He thought it was an accident. Now he understood. The murder had been hiding inside an ordinary sentence for 39 years. Someone got hurt, but Rebecca had not been the only person hurt. Her family had been damaged. Witnesses had been frightened. Investigators had been deceived, and an entire community had lived with a false story. The cold case was no longer cold. The evidence had survived. The people responsible had aged. Some had died. Some had disappeared. But the truth had remained. Vargas assembled the final case file. Photographs, DNA, financial records, audio, witness statements, the bracelet, the ledgers, the confession, and Rebecca's unfinished letter. The last page contained only a few words. If something happens to me, don't trust the police. Then, Dad knows why. The sentence had once sounded like an accusation. Now Vargas understood it differently. Rebecca knew her father had been trapped. She knew he had made mistakes. She knew he had helped create the situation that placed her in danger. But she also knew he was afraid. The letter was not simply about guilt. It was about betrayal. Rebecca had trusted the people closest to her, her father, her co-workers, the police, and someone had used that trust against her. 39 years later, investigators finally had the answer, but there was still one question. Why had Daniel Mercer believed he could get away with it? The answer was hidden inside one final document, a letter written by Mercer himself, and it revealed that he had been preparing for Rebecca's murder long before August 17, 1985, The letter was found inside a box that had been sealed for decades. It was not hidden in Mercer's home. It was hidden in a storage archive belonging to the company where he had worked. After Mercer died, the company liquidated old personnel files. Most were destroyed. One box survived because it had been marked for legal review. Inside were payroll records, insurance forms, disciplinary reports, and an envelope with Mercer's handwriting. The envelope contained 3 pages. No date, no address, just one sentence on the front. Rebecca will not stop. Vargas read it slowly. The first page described Rebecca as a problem, not a person, not a colleague, a problem. Mercer wrote that she had become obsessed with the company's finances. He claimed she was threatening to expose people. He wrote that she had copied documents, that she had spoken to outsiders, that she was becoming unpredictable. Then came a line that changed the entire timeline. I warned her once. Vargas stopped. Once. That meant the confrontation had begun before the murder. She searched old witness statements. 3 weeks before Rebecca disappeared, a co-worker had reported seeing Mercer arguing with her outside the office. The original report described the encounter as a disagreement. No follow-up. No formal interview. No concern. The co-worker had forgotten about it. Until now. Vargas found him. He was 80 years old. He remembered the argument clearly. Mercer had grabbed Rebecca's arm. Rebecca pulled away. She said, "Don't touch me again." Mercer answered, "You don't know what you're playing with." The witness assumed it was a workplace dispute. It was not. It was a warning. The second page of Mercer's letter described Rebecca's investigation. He knew she had found E17. He knew she had copies. He knew she had spoken with a lawyer, and he knew she planned to meet someone. Mercer wrote, "She thinks she has protection." Vargas wondered who that protection was. The answer appeared several lines later. Her father. Charles had been trying to shield Rebecca, but Mercer believed Charles could be pressured. Cole knew it too. The letter described a meeting between Mercer and Charles. Mercer wrote that Charles had begged them to leave Rebecca alone. He offered money. He offered documents. He offered to take responsibility, but Cole refused. The final line on the second page read, "She has already chosen." The third page was shorter, only 5 paragraphs. Mercer wrote that Rebecca had refused to surrender the documents. She had told him she would go to police. She had told him she had made copies. She had told him other people knew. Then Mercer wrote, "If she goes to them, we all go down." Vargas looked at the date on the storage file. The box had been archived in 1987, only 2 years after the murder. The letter had been written before Rebecca died. That changed everything. Mercer had been preparing. He had documented his fear. He had documented his motive. And he had written about Rebecca as though her death was inevitable. But he never explicitly said he planned to kill her. The prosecution still needed to connect the letter to the physical evidence. The DNA did that. The warehouse audio did that. The broken clasp did that. The witness testimony did that. And now another witness came forward. Her name was Patricia Owens. In 1985, she worked the night shift at a gas station near the industrial district. She had been interviewed briefly after Rebecca's body was discovered. The original investigator wrote, "No useful information." But Patricia had kept something. A handwritten note. She had written down the license plate of a dark sedan. She said she did it because the driver frightened her. The plate belonged to Richard Cole. Patricia remembered seeing the sedan parked outside the warehouse. She also remembered a second vehicle, Mercer's truck. Both were there. At approximately 8:40 p.m., the same time written in Cole's calendar. Rebecca was still alive when she entered the warehouse. She was dead later that night. The timeline was tightening. Vargas returned to the warehouse audio. She isolated the final seconds. The voices were clearer now. Rebecca was crying. Mercer was breathing heavily. Cole said, "Enough." Rebecca shouted, "You're going to prison." Cole answered, "No one is going to believe you." Then Mercer said something almost impossible to hear. "She knows too much." A chair moved. Rebecca screamed. Then Cole said, "Daniel." The audio ended. There was no explicit order to kill, but there was context. The three people were together. Rebecca was threatened. Mercer was physically aggressive. Cole was present. Then Rebecca stopped speaking. The silence became evidence. Vargas sent the audio to an independent forensic laboratory. The results were significant. The voice believed to belong to Mercer was consistent with recordings from his employment file. The voice believed to belong to Cole was also consistent. The unidentified fourth voice was still unclear, but investigators now knew it was not Warren. That eliminated one theory. The fourth man remained unknown. Then Warren contacted Vargas. He wanted to revise his statement. He said he had lied about one thing. He had not arrived after Rebecca was killed. He had arrived before. He had been inside the warehouse. He had heard Rebecca arguing with Cole. He had seen Mercer holding the hammer. And he had seen another man. Not Dalton. Not Charles. Someone else. Warren said the man was a security contractor. His name was Victor Lane. Lane had worked for Cole. He had no official police connection. He was the man wearing the police-style jacket. Warren said Lane was responsible for controlling the warehouse. He had been hired to intimidate witnesses. Vargas searched his records. Victor Lane had died in 2001, but his employment records were intact, and one document showed that Lane had been paid $30,000 3 days after Rebecca's murder. The payment came from E17. The network now had another participant. The question was whether Lane had physically participated in the murder. Warren said he had. He claimed Lane helped move Rebecca's body, but Warren insisted Lane did not strike her. That still pointed toward Mercer. Then investigators found Lane's old employment file. Inside was a photograph. Lane stood beside a dark sedan. On his right hand was a ring, the same ring visible in the restaurant photograph, but the ring had belonged to Richard Cole. Lane had been wearing it. Vargas realized the restaurant photograph had been misleading. The reflection was not Cole. It was Lane. Cole had not been in the parking area at the time investigators thought. He had entered later. That meant the photograph showed 3 men connected to the operation: Mercer, Lane, and Rebecca. Cole was still involved, but he may not have been physically present during the first confrontation. The timeline changed again. Rebecca met Mercer. Lane watched. Cole arrived later. Dalton watched from outside. Warren was called afterward. The operation was larger than anyone had imagined. Vargas returned to the financial records. Payments were made not only after the murder, they were made before. Mercer received money 1 week before. Lane received money 3 days before. Dalton received money for days before. Warren received money 6 days before. Cole was preparing everyone. This was not spontaneous. It was coordinated. But there was one payment that remained unexplained: $75,000, paid to an unknown account the day before Rebecca died. The account belonged to a woman, Margaret Sloan, the accountant. The woman Warren had named. Investigators found her living in Oregon. She was 90 years old. She agreed to speak. She arrived with a lawyer. She knew why they were there. She admitted managing the E17 account. She admitted transferring money. She admitted knowing Rebecca had discovered the scheme, but she denied knowing about the murder. Then Vargas showed her the ledger, the payment, the date, the amount. Sloan looked at it. I remember that. What was it for? She hesitated. Rebecca. The room went silent. Sloan explained. Cole wanted Rebecca followed. He wanted her frightened. The $75,000 was not a payment to kill her. It was money reserved to make the problem disappear. But Sloan said she did not know what make the problem disappear meant. She assumed it meant buying Rebecca's silence. Vargas asked when she learned Rebecca was dead. Sloan answered, the next morning. Who told you? Cole. What did he say? Sloan looked down. He said, the problem is finished. That phrase appeared in multiple records. Problem. Finished. Solved. The language of people who never wanted to write the word murder. Sloan also revealed something else. Cole had instructed her to close the E17 account immediately after Rebecca's death, but she did not. She copied the ledger. She kept the records. She had been afraid. Like everyone else. Vargas asked why she waited 39 years. Sloan said, because every person who knew the truth believed they were alone. That sentence explained the entire case. Each witness knew one piece. Nobody knew the whole picture. That was why the cover-up worked. Mercer knew the physical details. Cole controlled the money. Dalton knew the surveillance. Warren controlled the police response. Sloan controlled the accounts. Charles knew the family connection. Everyone had a reason to stay silent, and Rebecca was the only person trying to connect everything. She had almost succeeded. Sloan handed Vargas a final document, a payment authorization. It was signed by Richard Cole. The payment was made on August 16th, the day before Rebecca died. The recipient was Daniel Mercer. Amount: $20,000. Description: final arrangement. Vargas asked what the phrase meant. Sloan said she had never been told, but she remembered Cole giving Mercer instructions. She remembered one sentence: make sure this ends tomorrow. That was the closest thing investigators had to a direct instruction. Now the sequence was almost complete. Mercer had motive. Mercer had opportunity. Mercer had contact with Rebecca. Mercer's DNA was on her. Mercer's key ring had left a fragment. Mercer had been recorded with her shortly before her death. Mercer had received money the day before, and Mercer had written that Rebecca would not stop. The cold case was finally becoming a prosecution case. But there was still a problem. The public had been told for decades that Rebecca's murder was unsolved. If authorities announced an arrest based on a dead suspect, there would be outrage. Families would demand accountability, and prosecutors needed someone alive. Frank Dalton was alive. James Warren was alive. Margaret Sloan was alive.